Hello. Thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Brunner. I'm the executive editor of Lotham's Quarterly magazine, and I'm here today to moderate this panel. I'm very excited about the fact that we're doing these literary luncheon series, that Penn has organized this. Especially as an editor, the lunch hour is a time that used to be dedicated to authors and writers and editors sitting down and actually hashing out ideas, thinking through plots of books, talking about politics, talking about literature. And now the lunch hour is something that you do at your desk quickly with a sandwich while you're checking your emails. So I like that this brings back the possibility for us to sit down, speak with authors, and think about ideas in the middle of our day. For example, I have to go back to work after this. Now, again, I did one of these on Tuesday, and I mentioned that it would be nice if this was a 3-martini lunch, but we take what we can get. So I'm very pleased to have such wonderful authors with us today. The Belgian author, Amélie Nothomb, thank you very much for joining us, and the Turkish author, Buket Uzuner. Thank you for joining us today. So this is how it's going to go. Each of them are going to read for about 10 minutes from one of their novels, and then the three of us will have a discussion, and then we'll open it up for the audience to ask questions. All right, so actually, why don't we start with you, Buket? Whichever you prefer. But I just wanted to mention, we were discussing that you may begin your reading with a little bit of a discussion about politics and the situation in Turkey now.
I hope this is working. Hello, everybody. I'm Buket Uzuner from Istanbul, Turkey. I live in Istanbul, and I earn my life by writing about now 20 years. As being a woman writer, especially in that geography, you may understand it's not that easy. And today, before my reading, I want to give some little notes about what is going on in that geography, where I live and love to live. I'm an Istanbul lover, as I am a New York lover. And I always wanted to be an astronaut and submarine captain when I was a little girl. And my family and relatives, they thought that I was mad, and sometimes there is a saying in that generation that I was mixed in the hospital, that I didn't belong to that family because I was a mystery and not normal in many ways. Then, when I grew up, I understood that to be a writer in that geography, to be a writer, it includes everything, like being a submarine captain and astronaut. But it took me 4 years to realize that how difficult for a girl to be both astronaut and submarine captain. But in meantime, that I became one of the earliest, maybe the first Turkish civil woman who died by the submarine with the help of a Turkish journal who was doing those kind of funny things those times. Anyway, so the adventure doors were all closed to the women, and all the characters in the novels, adventure novels, were boys. And it took me so long time to realize that. Then when I decided to be a writer, and then I realized that I could do both. But then there was another block, that being a writer in those days especially was called, and since the Republican establishment in Turkey in the early 20th century, that was very tough, very difficult, and they were counted as enemy of the state. And things are getting better, but nowadays we are still having problems. For example, 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, 2 journalists are put in the jail just because of the books they were not published yet. And the publishing company was occupied by the police officers, and we still don't know what was really, thanks to the internet and Turkish WikiLeaks in many ways, that we got the files before publishing. But as being a writer, I must tell you here that the freedom of speech in Turkey is not getting any better. And according to the Reporters Without Border, Sans Frontières, that Turkey is ranking in terms of freedom for press now is 138 rank, which is so shameful. And since I'm here in the family of Pan International Free Voices Festival, I thought this is a good platform to tell about that. So maybe I start reading now. Yes. And I'm going to read a chapter from a short passage from my latest novel called Istanbulians or Istanbulites, whatever you call it. We call Istanbul, New Yorkers, one who lives in Istanbul. And in this novel, Istanbul herself is talking about herself, and she's a character. And let me read about it. I write in Turkish. This is the English translation. I am Istanbul. I am Istanbul, city of cities, mistress of metropolises, community of poets, seat of emperors, favorite of sultans, pearl of the world. My name is Istanbul, and my subjects call them Istanbul. And of all the world cities, I am without doubt the most magnificent, mysterious, and terrible, a city upon those shores pagans, Christians, Jews, and unbelievers, friends and foe alike, have found safe harbor through the ages, a place where you love and betrayal, pleasure and pain live side by side. I, daughter of Poseidon, miracle of Argonauts, empress of medieval cities, the harbinger of a new age, whose star shines anew in the 21st century, am the city of prosperity and ruin, of defeat and glad tidings. Istanbul is my name. It is I, place of extremes, the full gamuts of human emotions experienced at one and the same time, from the sublime of the basest, the loftiest, to the lowest, I. My name is Istanbul, eternal archangel and goddesses of the cities. They come and go, leaving their marks on my soul. I have seen these rise and fall, be born and decline. I harbor their jumbled relics in my underground sisters and walls. Blue as hope, green as poison, rosy as dawn, I am Istanbul. I am in the Judas tree, in acacia, in lavender. I am turquoise. I am unfathomable, the muse of possibility, vitality, creativity. My name is Istanbul. That's what they call me, what they've been calling for me century past, but I have been Constantinopolis, the city of Constantine. I began as Byzantium. I have had many names since the gate of heavenly felicity, Dar Saadet, Derus Saadet, New Rome, Asitane, Daraliye, Hepolis, Charigra, Istanbul, Constantinople. Mortals are like that, forever changing names, laws and borders. I laugh at those mortals, taking themselves so seriously in their fleeting mortal world of false illusion, fears and shadows. Had anyone thought to consult me, I would have chosen queen of all I survey. What is that but I am anyway? I am the queen of queens, city of cities. I have walked with emperors and sultans, shared the confidence of travelers and poets. Aspiring authors still line up to write about me. In fact, here it comes with the one now. The soul of even a great and noble city can feel the strain of late. I've been feeling restless, lest I harm myself and the 15 million people who reside with me. I seek distraction. That's why I choose this day to turn my attention to Yeşilköy, my good old green village, now with my mother face, home to what they call Atatürk Airport. The original name was Ayastephanos. That was back in 395 or 495. I can't quite remember now. One night of that terrifying tempest, my Byzantine guests were still living here, and a small boat that was a transport to St. Stephanos remains to Rome was forced to find refuge in this port. I remember it was though it was yesterday. They caused me great distress, which I had of course caused a storm to them. It was indeed a terrible night and blindering squall. The remains of the saint languished in the port, waiting for fair weather. But this body never left, and the church in which he was finally interred was called Hagia Stephanus, hence the neighborhood Stephanus. Many years later, in 1926 or 1927, long after the arrival of my Turkish guest, the author Halit Ziya Uşaklıgil, who was fond of the place, renamed it Yeşilköy, and that's how it stayed. I've seen it time and time that they really addicted in my love. It is no mortal, this love in Istanbul. They carry me always in their hearts, and to me they must return homesick, pining, missing me to death. Their heart ablaze with an unchangeable love, never to be found elsewhere. Once in Istanbul, always in Istanbul. I am last song of the lips of dying exiles. I am paying for poetry, even though to those who imagine they have left me of their own accord. I remain forever the lost home, for I am the smell of earth, the tang of sea, the stuff of dreams. I am Istanbul, city of magic, city of enchantments, object of the world's desire. And for millennia, no one has ever left me alone. I will never be abandoned. I will never be deserted. I am the only female on the earth who never had menopauses for more than 2,700 years. My name is Istanbul.
That was wonderful, thank you. And this novel, Istanbul, is one of the narrators of the novel, and it's 15 characters in the airport, sort of trapped for 4 hours in what may or may not be a bomb threat. But I realized that I was remiss. I didn't give you your proper introduction, but I kind of like that your work gave you your proper introduction. Let me do it now.
Okay.
Buket is the author of short stories, travelogues, and novels. Her books have been on the Turkish national bestseller list since 1992 and translated into 8 languages. Buket is the recipient of the Yunus Nadi Prize for The Sound of Fish Steps, which was published in 1993. The Mediterranean Waltz was awarded the best novel of 1998 by the University of Istanbul. Uzuner has been presented as the honorary fellow writer by the University of Iowa in 1996. And in 2003, she earned the Middle East Technical University Appreciation Award. She lives in Istanbul with her son, it says. So thank you. And we will now hear from you, and I'm going to give you your introduction first. And then your work will speak for you. Amélie Nothomb was born in Japan to Belgian parents. She's the author of more than 20 novels, including Tokyo Fiancé and Hygiene and the Assassin, which I believe you'll be reading from now, which was just published here in the States. Her books have been translated into more than 35 languages. She has won many awards, including the French Academy's 1999 Grand Prix for the novel, and the Grand Prix Gino in 2008. She lives in Paris and Brussels. Thank you. So please.
So I shall read the beginning of my latest translated book, Hygiene and the Assassin, Amélie, which was, in fact, my very first novel, which was published in 1992. And I wrote it in French, but I shall try to read it in English. It's the beginning. When the imminent demise of the great writer Frédéric Statache became public knowledge, he was given 2 months to live, journalists the world over requested private interviews with the 80-year-old gentleman. To be sure, he enjoyed considerable prestige. Nevertheless, it was astonishing to see them flocking to his bedside. These emissaries from dailies as renowned as, we have taken the liberty of translating their names, the Nanking Tatler and the Bangladesh Observer. Thus, 2 months before his death, Monsieur Tache was given the opportunity to measure the extent of his celebrity. His secretary set about making a drastic selection from among the various proposals. He eliminated all the solicitations from the foreign press because the dying man spoke only French and did not trust interpreters. He turned down all reporters of color because with age the writer had begun to express racist views, which contrasted sharply with his most deeply held opinions. Fashion specialists were greatly discomfited and interpreted this as a senile desire to cause a scandal. Finally, the secretary politely discouraged requests from television networks, women's magazines, papers that were considered too political, and above all, any medical journal that might have wanted to investigate how the great man had developed such a rare form of cancer. It was not without a certain sense of pride that Monsieur Tasch learned he was afflicted with the dread Eisenbeinerplatz syndrome, more commonly referred to as cartilage cancer, which the eponymous learned physician had individuated in Cayenne in the 19th century among a dozen or so convicts imprisoned for sexual crimes followed by homicide, and which had never been diagnosed since that time. Monsieur Tasch viewed his diagnosis as a hitherto unhoped for ennoblement. With his hairless, obese physique, that of a eunuch in every respect except for his voice, he dreaded dying of some stupid cardiovascular disease. Upon composing his epitaph, he was careful to mention the sublime name of the Teutonic doctor, thanks to whom he would leave this world with a flourish. Modern medicine was sincerely puzzled by the fact that this adipose sedentary man has survived to the age of 83. He was so fat that for years he had admitted not being able to walk. He blatantly ignored any recommendation from nutritionists and had terrible eating habits. In addition, he smoked 20 Havana cigars a day. But his alcohol consumption was moderate, and he had practiced chastity since time immemorial. The doctors could find no alternative explanation for the sound functioning of a heart smothered in fat. For all that, his survival remained a mystery, like the origins of the syndrome that would bring an end to it. Not a single newspaper the world over could help but be scandalized by the media coverage devoted to this upcoming death. Letters to the editor were largely devoted to reaffirming the paper's self-criticism. Thus, in keeping with the laws of modern news coverage, the features by the rare journalists who had been selected were eagerly anticipated. Biographers were already hovering. Editors were arming their battalions. There were, of course, a number of intellectuals who wondered if the man's prodigious success was not overrated. Had critics Tasch been truly innovative? Had he not simply been the ingenious heir to overlooked creators? They went on to support their thesis by citing authors with esoterical names whose works they themselves had not read, a fact which enabled them to speak about them penetratingly. All these factors helped to ensure that the man's dying moments would make an exceptional stir. No doubt about it, it was a resounding success. The author, who had 22 novels to his name, lived on the ground floor of a modest building. He required an accommodation where everything was on the same level because he could only get around in a wheelchair. He lived alone without any pets. Every day, a very brave nurse would come by at around 5 o'clock to bath him. He could not have stood for anyone else to do his shopping, so he went himself to buy what he needed in the neighborhood stores. His secretary, Ernest Gravelin, lived 4 stories up, but as much as he could, he avoided seeing him. He telephoned regularly and Tash never missed an opportunity to begin their conversation by saying, "So sorry, my dear Ernest, I am not dead yet." Gray then reminded those journalists who had been selected that the old man basically had a good heart. Did he not give half his income every year to charitable organizations? And could this secret generosity not also be detected in some of the characters of his novels? Of course, he terrorizes us all, me to begin with, but I maintain that his mask of aggression is mere playfulness. He enjoys acting the placid, cruel fat man in order to hide his great sensitivity. His words did little to reassure the chroniclers who, in any case, had no desire to overcome their jealousy toward fear, for it gave them an aura of warriors and wits. The news of the writer's imminent death was reported on January 10th. On the 14th, a first journalist went to meet him. He entered the apartment. It was so dark that it took a moment before he was able to distinguish a corpulent figure in a wheelchair in the middle of the living room. The old man's lugubrious voice uttered no more than an inexpressive "Good morning, monsieur," to put him at ease, which in fact only served to make the poor fellow more tense than ever. "I am extremely pleased to meet you, Monsieur Tash. This is a great honor." The tape recorder was switched on, eagerly awaiting the words of the silent old man. "I beg your pardon, Monsieur Tash. Would you mind if I switch on a light? I cannot see your face."
"It is 10 o'clock in the morning, monsieur. I do not switch on the lights at such a time. And besides, you will see me soon enough, once your eyes have adjusted to the darkness. So make the most of the respite you have been granted, and in the meantime you'll have to make do with my voice. It is the most beautiful thing about me."
"You do indeed have a very beautiful voice."
"Yes."
The silence weighed heavily upon the intruder, and he wrote in his notebook, "This silence is caustic. Avoid as much as possible." Mr. Tash, people the world over admire your determination to avoid being admitted to the hospital despite all the doctor's orders. So the first question I must ask you, how do you feel?
"I feel just I have felt for 20 years.
In other words?
I do not feel much."
Not much of what?
"Not much."
I understand.
"Then I admire you."
There was no irony in the sick man's implacably neutral voice. The journalist gave an awkward little laugh before continuing, "Monsieur Tash, with a man like yourself, I won't waste time with the circumlocution common to my profession. So if you allow me, I'll ask you outright, what might be the thoughts and moods of a great writer who knows he is going to die?" Silence. A sigh.
"I don't know, my good man."
Perhaps I should end it here. I don't know how long I read.
I can just go on to say, for those who haven't yet read this novel, that the Nobel Prize-winning novelist basically destroys journalist after journalist, sending them fleeing from his house. They cannot stand him. And my favorite one is where he describes his eating habits to a journalist in such disgusting detail that the journalist starts to get very nauseous. And I read it recently, pregnant. And I thought to myself, I'm going to throw up. And then the journalist threw up. And then I did. It really it speaks to truth. There's one other thing about this book. The novelist has 20 books to his name. This is your first book. You now have about 20 books to your name. And he has one manuscript unfinished, and he says, every great novelist must leave one manuscript unfinished. My understanding is that you have about 50 manuscripts unfinished.
No, I have much more. I have.
Well, they're finished.
All of them are finished.
Yeah, so
I'm not yet a great writer, so sorry.
you gotta leave one unfinished.
I shall care about it.
You write far more
Yes.
books a year than you publish. And then how do you choose? What's the reason that you don't publish some of them?
Well, first of all, I cannot publish that much. I am now writing my 71st novel. If I publish all of that, it's just obscene. The second reason is that the purpose of writing it is not always to publish it. When I write something, I don't know why I write it. I just know that I'm pregnant with it and I have to write it. At that moment, it's not possible to think about being published. So I write 3,7 novels a year. And each winter, I reread all what I wrote in the year. And at that moment, I choose if I want to be published and which one of the 3,7 I shall publish.
And are some of them, are there things that you write about that you don't want publicly discussed?
Of course.
Are they too personal? Are they true to your actual life? Or
They are more personal, not because of my life, but because of my obsessions. I have some obsessions which I believe are understood only by myself. So,
yeah, I really want to ask about that. All right, we'll have to wait for some of those unpublished novels. But you said that actually you plan never to allow them to be published.
yes,
Is that correct?
I already wrote my testimony in order, when I will be dead, I want them to be never shown. This is a real problem because I think that for 75 years, no problem, my testimony is enough. But after, it's worth less. But, well, you will tell me, but don't be afraid, Amélie Nothomb, 75 years after your death, everybody forgets you. But you can never be sure that there's still not some crazy man or woman who remembers you and who wants to find back the manuscripts. So this is a real problem to me because as my manuscripts are my children, I cannot want to destroy them, but I want them to be unreachable. So there are several solutions, but they don't come with them. The first solution, of course, is space. Space is not sure enough. There's more and more people in space. In fact, the best solution would be the Vatican. I'm afraid that the Vatican doesn't agree.
They are very particular about the manuscripts that they take.
Yes. We are open to every suggestion.
That's great. And you've shown them to no one?
To no one.
To no one. Now, are there some things, and this is sort of a question for both of you, are there some topics, both of you actually write a lot about your own personal lives. In some aspects, well, you as a travel writer, to some of the writing that you wrote about New York, and there's the piece and Paris, and even Istanbul, although I imagine that there's some part of yourself in it. Is there some place where there's a limit, something about your own life that you won't talk about? I mean, memoir, for example, right now is huge, and yet, is there some limit for either of you? Yes.
There is a difference between writing about yourself and your personal life. And nowadays, not only in Turkey, but all over the world that I travel, mostly in Europe, almost all my writer friends are having the same trouble that young writers, they want to write their own life as a book, as a fictitious book, and they believe that their life is that important. And then the reason why they want to be a writer is fame and richness, which is not the correct way, you know. So mostly those Turkish young kids who want to be a writer, I tell them if you want to be a writer, you have to have your own unique ideas. Of course, we only write love and death. And if you watch Woody Allen's movies, which I am one of the fans of his movies, except his pedophilist thing way, but he writes almost everything. He repeats himself. But the way how he takes it, we see his life inside the story, but still it's interesting. So, of course, I am in my novels and books, but the literary travel writings are different because they are just like a diaries. And I strongly believe there must be distinction between your personal life and your personal ideas. It's totally different. And in Turkey, there's a Turkish journalist among us now, and he also knows that. My private life is not on the public, and it's all my own. But many people knows what kind of coffee I like and where I go mostly, and my taste is about the literature and other things.
I would tell that the greatest limit is the other. I can tell all what I want about me, no problem. I am a kind of raw material as another. But the great limit is the other. Because when others are involved in your life, you are not sure that they want to appear in your life. So this is what I pay attention to. When others appear in my book, I make sure they cannot be recognized by other than me.
Now, okay, one of the themes that you bring up love and death, that's a theme, but you also seem to write about love and fear. And somehow that the emotion of love is intertwined with fear. And you said, actually, I think you said at one point that love is the indispensably must of an Istanbul novel. And that there's something about that very idea that you want to write about, or have to write about. But yet, your love is always some kind of battle with courage and with fear.
Actually, that was written by my editor. It was not me. But I didn't like it, especially the Turkish edition, says in an Istanbul novel there must be a love. But in every novel there must be a love because it's connected with life, And look at our lives, whatever we are, wherever we live or whatever we do. Actually, we don't know what will happen to us tomorrow, and the literature and art helps us to tell us that we are not alone wherever we are, and it doesn't. Literature has no limits for me, and I'm very much fed by the European literature when I was growing up, and German literature, French, and Russian literature, and I count Goethe as one of my grandfathers, literary grandfathers, and Victor Hugo also. That his web literature phenomena is so important that he says there basically that there is no cultural boundaries between literature. There are literature for human. There is only one literature, but it's written by different languages, like written in Turkish, written in French or English. That's why literature is so important that connects us. We are here because of that today. And it doesn't matter if she's writing in French or I'm writing in Turkish. We are writing all about love and death. And of course, love is a scary thing. And if you ask anybody in this room, and it's a nice thing, they will say, but we all have experiences about how scary, especially when it ends. And if you're writing about human, which is what literature is about all, and love and fear must be in it, I believe. I don't know what you think.
You've also written about love, the Tokyo fiancé.
Yes, well, as Buket, I think that love is in writing itself. I tried the opposite. I tried to write a novel only about hate, avoiding any love as an experiment. And well, I finished it, but it was totally unreadable. So, I mean, chemically, you need to involve love in it. It's part of writing.
I'm laughing because I'm one of her fans in Turkey, and several books of her translated into Turkish. And especially I visited Japan. She became my soulmate in many sense because we share many things about Japanese culture, and we have the same mind about it, I guess. Thank you.
Now, going back to what you were saying, though, about literature and that we are all sort of connected in this, the reading of these different books and different literature. In the novel, The Sound of Fish Steps, you actually make all of your characters great literary figures, or the great-grandchildren of literary figures. So there's, or historic figures too, there's Joan of Arc, there's Amélie Nothomb, there's Galileo. And I'm wondering what you feel in relation to what you were saying before about the burden or responsibility that we carry to that past and that lineage of the artist and of the writer.
I believe that we have no chance to choose our relatives, nations, our color or language, religion, whatever. So since my childhood, that little girl who wanted to be an astronaut and a captain for the submarine, I always wanted to create my own family. And I do actually this workshop with the Turkish young readers in Turkey, that if you want to create your own family, who you would choose. And it doesn't matter if they are coming from the literary field. It could be from, if they are a fan of football or science, they could choose those relatives. But the main point is you have to tell yourself, it's a bit psychological test, why you choose. So there is a small studio in Istanbul I own, a little tiny place, and one wall is called My Relatives Family Picture. And there you will see some of those writers which appeared in that Sound of Fish Steps novel, that like Romain Gary, the great French writer. I dedicated that novel to him actually, to his memory. And then you can see Anais Nin and Victor Hugo, some Turkish writers like Atilla İlhan and Sevgi Soysal, Yaşar Kemal. So this is how I feel, that, you know, those, the fashionable word now, the other, you know, it's very fashionable everywhere where I go, they say the other. The other was our actual neighbor, the other is me. So literature must be, in my opinion, bring us together, not pull us apart, because we are very same. So when I travel, for example, to the North Africa, when I sit and have tea with the Bedevi at the desert, that he tells me first, he asks me questions that if I am single and he has 3 wives and he wants me this 4th wife and all those things, since I come from the Islamic culture, so I would understand this and that. And then next thing he says that the Atatürk, he hates Atatürk because he brought the secularism to Turkish culture, so that's why I'm sitting there almost naked in his eyes, that, you know, clothes, and then we discuss, and he offers me this nane, the mint tea, and then we discuss, and suddenly I tell him that I have only one husband, but I can take you to my 2nd husband. He gets shocked. What is this? Are you Turkish? Are you Islamic? Because I'm coming to the Middle East. But the point is actually in my writing that I want to, we have this identity problem in Turkey since late Ottoman period. So people don't know that, especially our friends from Western world, that they don't know where we are really belonging. Are we Western or Eastern? And this problem actually sits in the middle of all the Turkish writers' novels, maybe inside of the book or on the top of it. So what I'm trying to say that we are actually very similar, and the Turkish culture is very unique in that sense, that we are Balkanian, Mediterranean, Caucasian, Asian, Middle Eastern. So there is no other writer I know in the world that invited those 6 literary conferences that I am invited for the Balkanian writers, they come around, and then Mediterranean writers, Caucasian, Asian, and if there is, I hope there will be a freedom for speech in Middle East, then I will be invited to the Middle East cultures, because most of my Arabic friend writers, they are living abroad in exile, because there's no freedom of speech there. So if there is this culture belong to those 6, 7 geography, cultural geography, of course the identity problem must be in the middle of, in the spine of our novels, and I feel it will take some more time, but we have to tell to our friends in the Western world that we belong to all those cultures. Yes, we are European too, And I always remind to my friends, especially when I'm in Europe, and Ottoman, when the Ottoman Empire was falling down, Ottoman Empire was called the sick man of where? Europe, and we didn't call it, so of course we are sick. So unfortunately, you will see this identity crisis or problems in the Turkish novels for maybe next 20 years more. But then maybe literature helps us to get together like we are doing today.
And that actually brings me, this problem that you bring up, brings me to something that we were emailing a little bit about, which is also the situation of being a woman writer in Turkey. This also leads to your second husband you'll be taking. And that you are both in a position to be expected to speak in a certain voice, and also defying that and defining it all at the same time. Can you talk just a little bit about that? And then I might ask you the same question as well.
I think being a woman is difficult everywhere. It's I'm a biologist and environmental scientist by education, so women's problem for me, it sounds very much like environmental problems. If there is environmental pollution somewhere, you can get the acid rains and now nuclear rains, and then after what happened in Japan, again, our Japan. And women problems is everywhere. I lived in Norway and Finland for several years, and because I was the young girl who wanted to travel, and I was coming from a middle-class family, so I didn't have any chance to travel. So that the only way for me to get scholarships. That's why in my biography you would see 5 nice universities that I studied. It's because mostly I wanted to get the scholarships, and that's why how I traveled the world, and I'm still trying to travel. And being even in those Scandinavian countries, there were, I mean, they are very good in the women's condition. I think the top of the list. But they still have the women houses, you know, that who are beaten by husbands, and they, I don't know what they call in English, but they put shelters. So we have it. Of course, the women in our countries in the shelters doubles, maybe 3 times more than them. So there is a women problem in the world, because I believe we are in writing and science and everything at most 100 years. So it's very short time comparing the world history, literary or cultural history. That's why we have problem. But being a Turkish woman makes it double. And nowadays, not only the freedom of speech problem, but the so-called honor killings in Turkish, namus, that the honor belongs to only women and women's body, and it is very feudal thing. And actually, I tell to the foreigner Western journalists who make interviews with me in Turkey that the biggest problem of Turkish culture is the women problem. When we solve it, it's not only in Islam. It's the feudality is there, and you know, we have to distinguish this that the women problem is actually our problem. And nowadays the numbers are like that. 5 women in one day is killed in Turkey by the name of honor, and this is our biggest problem. And we women, the feminists, are getting stronger in Turkey, and they are pushing the government and the state to change the rules and the laws against those men. I believe they are stressed too, because they have to kill that girl because she wants to get divorced, and these kind of things.
Right, it's a game that they don't necessarily want to play themselves.
No.
Yeah.
No. So I'm glad you asked me this, because this is as important as the freedom of speech, the women's problem in Turkey.
And Amélie, I read that your own family expected of you to marry, have children, and that instead getting pregnant with these books and giving birth to them was not what they expected from their daughter.
Yes, of course. My problems were nothing compared to what we just listened to. But it is true that even in plain Belgium, it is still more difficult. Well, I come from a very traditional family, very Catholic family, and it's true that in my family, women have to get married and have children, if they want. Maybe publish a book. But if, first of all, she's married and she had several children. which didn't happen to me. So I am the social case of the family. But it's not so important. I agree with being the social case of the family. It's not, of course, very anecdotic compared to what you told of. But you told me, I didn't know it, you told me when we were previously talking that there was a rumor.
Yeah.
It's not so important, but it's not the first time that people tell that I'm not writing my books. So I would like to know who writes my book.
Do you mean a risk?
No, let me explain the rumor.
Yes.
So I was mentioning it to her, I read this on the internet, and it's a lot of places on the internet, so I brought it up to her upstairs, because to me it immediately seemed false. But that there is a mysterious older Italian man that you apparently had correspondence with on an early version of the internet. You've never met him, but he gave you all the ideas for your novels. And I immediately thought something very 18th century about this, like she didn't write them, she found them in an attic, I don't believe this at all. And she was shocked, I never heard of this
I never
before.
heard about it, but there were several rumors, and all of them were very different. The only point was that my books were not a book, they were not written by a woman. It had to be a man, and another one.
Right.
An Italian. Yes. So yes. So I would. My question is, I would love to meet that man. At last.
Right, that way that would make your family happy too.
Yes.
No, that's true. They claim this all happened in the 80s and 90s. Now, can you also speak a little bit about your own persona? You have a very public persona in France. Your hat is part of it, your appearance, and you play a sort of particular intellectual public role. Can you talk a little bit about that as a responsibility, or how you wear it?
Well, I don't feel it at all like that. I know that it used to be told about me, but it's not my feeling. The fact is that I became a writer. That was a miracle for me. Of course, I hoped it, but I didn't know it would succeed. And I became a very successful writer, which was even more surprising to me. So nowadays, when you become a successful writer, you have to appear. This is still a problem to me. I was not brought up in the idea of appearing. So of course it's difficult. It's difficult for everybody, not only for famous writers. It's difficult to appear for everybody. So I wondered, well, how can I be? I hate my physics, so I wonder how can I appear without people vomiting when. So this was the only solution I found, and I'm not sure it succeeds enough.
I don't feel nauseous at all.
But there's no persona. It's only, for me, it's difficult to appear. It's not so awesome. I'm just wearing a hat, Awesome. If you take off the hat, it's so normal. So, but this means something. It means that nowadays, at least in Europe, it's so easy to seem eccentric. Mm-hmm. You do the smallest thing, because this is really the smallest thing. You do the smallest thing, it's enough to appear eccentric. Well, I'm not bothered with that. I just thought, well, I didn't know it was so easy.
You were saying that in France, you get, during interviews, it becomes a big conversation piece. That they have to talk to you about this and sort of take it apart and who's the real you and what is this?
Yes, I'm wondering about this question. Of course, they are not very interesting, but what I think is that these questions could be asked to everybody. It is always difficult for everybody to appear everywhere. When I was a schoolgirl, it was so difficult to go in class. So the same question can be asked to everybody.
Yeah, we all have to present ourselves all the time.
Yes.
I'm just going to ask maybe one more question of the two of you, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. Both of you, in different ways, have lived very international lives. your whole childhood was really from place to place to place. And you, as a travel, in your travel writing, I love it. You sent me actually something that I hadn't read about New York, where you kind of talk about different cities as different characters, Paris as the ex-husband, Istanbul as the soulmate, and New York as the passionate lover. Yeah, I know, these are really good. I have to say that makes a lot of sense.
I add Madrid lately.
Oh yes? And what is Madrid?
Future husband.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about how this travel, and this is for both of you. I remember that you said at one point, if you hadn't have had the life that you lived internationally, if say you had just been born in Brussels and lived there your whole life, you might not have become a writer.
How can I know? We will never know.
Well, that is true. We really won't. This is going to have to be a hypothetical conversation. We can have it anyway. So why don't you start just a little bit about that?
Well, when my writer friend says that I will never know that I will be a writer, I get shocked because I knew it from the very beginning. And I don't know how, but it's mostly your parents. My mother is very much involved in literature, and she was the first person who told me that everything has a story. So if you don't like to eat the food that she was making the story about it. We had this famous Ashura, which is the Noah's Ark's period that they made this creation that they put all kinds of different things in it and you create funny stuff. And children don't like it. So I remember my mother was sitting in the kitchen and telling me in the Noah's Ark, there is a bit of this, some bit of this, and then you were listening. And I always thought my mother was in that ark. And also she was the one who told me that those great guys had a wife or daughter. And then because you can't find in history books, what is the name of Noah's Ark? And it's coming from an Islamic culture. We don't know very much about Bible and all those things, Even the mountain, Ararat, is in Turkey, and the ark is probably somewhere there, the pieces of the ark. So when you know that there is a story involved, everything that, the thing that you don't want to wear because it's old and you want something new. And then my mom was going, the tailor, somewhere in this small town in Russia, he was sitting there and he had to have needle and he didn't have any needle, and you start to like your clothes, and then it has a story. So then those times in late 60s and 70s when I grew up, there were stamps, of course, and I still I like to go to post offices still and send stamps because I love those things. And then she was showing me this, one of the legendary Turkish woman writer, Halide Edip Adıvar, was on the stamp, the photo, and then she was telling me, look at her, she's on the stamps. So I was, I must be a writer, and I must be on the stamp, and I really like it, but for God's sake, there is no stamps anymore. So I always knew that I would be a writer, whatever I do, beside the astronaut and all those things. So I had this strong feeling inside, and I still believe the telling story and making story, which is the most human thing that brings us together. Yesterday or 2 days ago, there was a wonderful panel discussion about the e-books and the future of the books. And I'm not one of those scared that if we will have all digital books. No, because the story will be in it. But I'm scared that if the writers, biggest part of the writers community in future, if they think that the fame and money comes from literature, that is more scary for me, because everybody wants to be a writer, and who will read those books? And those very popular thing, especially in Turkey now, they plan their books. If there's a popular thing, stuff going on. For example, Sufism is very popular nowadays, and if you write anything about Sufism, it sells a lot. And because Mevlana Rumi was living in Turkey in those Selçuklu times before Ottoman Empire, so our Western friends, they expect Sufi books from Turkey. And it's so, metaphysics are really is up nowadays. So this scares me. I mean, it scares more more than ebooks because story is so important and being Chilean and courageous, that makes you a writer, especially if you're a woman. That's all.
No, thank you. And we were talking about your own sort of the international experience and life that you lead and how that brought you to writing.
Of course, this is the $1,000 question. What would I be if I would have been born in Belgium and brought up in Belgium? How can I know? But it's not so easy because you see, I got an older sister and a brother, and both of them had the same life than I had, and they are not writers. So you see, it's not a magic formula. I changed countries when I was a child and a teenage about every 3 years. And every 3 years, it was for me the end of the world, and I had to begin everything again in another very further, far away country. So of course it was very difficult. Very soon I noticed that the only thing that was my own was language. It was the only thing I didn't lost every 3 years. Every 3 years I lost my home, my friends, my nanny, my dog, my school, my life. The only thing which was left over was language. So I suppose this was the reason why I became so much obsessed by language. I didn't know I was supposed to become a writer. Of course, I read a lot, but I admired, and I still do, so much literature that it seemed unreachable. You know, how can I become a writer? It's just not. It's such a temple. How can I enter that temple? So when I finally arrived in Belgium, my very first time in Europe, I was 17 years old, and I studied philology. Philology is everything about language. So the result of a long obsession. But not at all in order to become a philology teacher or writer, because it doesn't lead you to be a writer. At that time, my only ambition was to become Japanese. And when I turned out, when I was 21, I bought a one-way ticket to Tokyo. And I went back in my country, believing that all my problems would end when I found back the native soil. And of course, when I arrived in Japan, the big problems began. So I wrote it in several novels. But at that moment, believe me, I didn't know I was supposed to write them someday in a novel. I wrote them many years later. So finally, my Japanese experience was a tragedy and a failure. And 2 years later, I was 23, I escaped Japan. And I went back in Belgium thinking, my goodness, what am I going to do? How shall I work? How shall I earn my life? Well, I had already begun to write several manuscripts, but without any idea, you know. I began to write manuscripts when I was 17 years old, only because I was so bad, feeling so bad that I didn't know what I was doing. But that being 23, feeling so humiliated because in the Japanese company, you know, I ended in the bathroom.
Right, you started working for the company, you've written about this,
yes,
and slowly went down the line until you're cleaning toilets.
Until cleaning
And this is a true
toilets.
story.
This is a true story.
Yeah.
So as I cleaned toilets for 7 months, I wondered that nothing could be, I was already so humiliated that I shouldn't be afraid of anything. Even if I wrote novels and no publishers would want them, it wouldn't be important.
It's not as bad as toilet cleaning.
Yes. So at that moment, I wrote this one, which was my 11th manuscript, and it was quite easily published in Paris. I don't know if this answers your question, but
That's right.
it's a kind of answer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, so we have about 15, 20 minutes. Why don't we open it up for questions? Is there any questions from the audience? Please.
If anyone else is.
There's a
Gentleman, sir.
No,
Right back there.
this is facetious, but Amélie, do you think you wear that hat because you were actually an older man?
Yes, of course, you got it. You know, indeed, the hair are fixed to the hat, and it makes me look so female.
I want to ask each of you about the experience of reading yourself in English translation. Is it the voice that you recognize? Is it another, is it a décalage? Is it a shift from the voice you recognize?
With
as your own-
English,
your
I
own
don't
language?
have that problem, but with Greek and Hebrew, which was published also in my books, they were reading when I was there. That was really, oh, what is it? I was really wondering. But with English, no, because my second language, English, so it's familiar for me that I read also here. But other languages than that, French is okay, I understand un petit peu, but the Greek and Hebrew, especially the alphabet is different.
But what about this, just the sense of the music of your own text?
Of course,
Is it
mother
so
tongue.
different? Is
No.
it slightly odd, or is it?
Especially, it depends which language you're writing those lines. And when she was, for example, Amélie was reading that man's voice, and then I was dreaming that, how was it in her mind when she was writing in French? Because she
Worse.
heard that. But I think I understand your point, and of course, the language you're writing, especially for fiction, essays are different. That when the first time when you use the love words and the hatreds and all those daily things when you're in your childhood, it affects so much because it's like running, when you're writing.
Well, for me to hear myself to see the text in English, of course there's a change of music, but most of all, I must tell the first thing is that for me it's the sound of success. Because believe me, to be, especially for a Belgian writer, it's definitely the sound of success.
Yes, right there.
I have a question for Amélie. You've written so many manuscripts, you write so many per year. How do you do it physically? How do you spend all day at the computer or?
Oh no, I don't even own a computer because I'm unable to use it. I am the very old style writer. But I write every day without any exception, even when I'm ill, even when I have huge problem. I write every day from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. So this is a discipline. But I know that I need it in order to survive.
Yes, back there.
In your books, you express a big love of Japan, but it also comes with a dose of criticism. How were your books read in Japan?
Well, what was already wonderful is that they were read. If I would write such books about China, they wouldn't be read in China. They were read and bestsellers in Japan. Well, of course, they didn't enjoy it so much. But they were read, and this is an excellent point about Japan. Like any other people in the planet, they don't enjoy being criticized, but they care, and that's very good. Well, for the rest, of course, I love Japan. It is still now my favorite country, but we all know it. It's when you love somebody, you criticize him. It's always the
I just, several of us who are here in the audience have just finished reading the Tokyo Fiancé and Becca Instructor, one is sitting right there. And we very, very much enjoyed the book. And we also learned that your books have not yet begun to really inundate the readers in the United States. What do you say about that?
Excuse me, I didn't understand it. Maybe because of
They
English.
have a class where they were reading Tokyo Fiancé.
Yes.
And she's asking about how that only some of your books have now been translated into English and in the U.S.
Oh, yes.
Your sort of popularity here in the U.S.
Yes.
Well, you know, it's already great. I mean, it's normal. I believe I'm perhaps the only Belgian writer who be partially translated in English. It's already great, and everything needs a beginning. Of course, it's the beginning of a very long love affair.
Yes.
It's just a comment. I just want to thank Amélie because you always have the most unpredictable answer. So it's always an unexpected answer. It's very cool.
Definitely my favorite so far is the vision of your manuscripts floating through space in such a Is there, yes.
This is also a question for Amélie. One of the things I find most fascinating about many of your books is this philosophical engagement with the reader or the audience, that you take them into almost a oppositional argumentative state where they're somehow included in the experience. So such as our moderator was saying about, she has this visceral reaction to what the journalist is experiencing. So it's when you provoke that on the reader. I think particularly with Sid Sukari, there's the viewer of the television show that is then forced into complicity with the viewers in the novel. And how would you think, how would I behave in this situation? How would I behave if I'm confronted with pretext d'attache? You have to, and suddenly you have a journalist who can actually meet him and defeat his psychological games. I'm just curious about that.
You know, I don't publish all what I write, but of course if I publish a book, it is for the reader. The reader is the most important character. I pushed this thing so far that in my latest published book in France, the reader is indeed the most important character. It's difficult to explain now, but I was told it would be translated someday in American. So I hope you get to read it. But I have nothing more to say. Of course, you are all of you is the main character, and it's fascinating, but it's also a big problem to me, because of course it means that we share it, and it means it's not mine, and it means that I am in great danger. And believe me, it is true. I am in great danger because people feel so much at home in my novels that some of them have the feeling they own me. And it's very difficult to put some border.
It's interesting, we were sort of talking about this upstairs, that there's something very personal about what you're writing about, so that when you're reading it, you feel that you know you. And there's something very straightforward about it. And your writing, on the other hand, it's actually, I read somewhere that it was compared to Borges. And I actually think that that was very accurate, at least in my reading of it. For example, I just finished the Sound of Fish Steps. And it's this novel where they're in an asylum, maybe, but it's also a dormitory, but then you're not sure if they're in heaven, but then you're not sure if they're in hell. And it's a labyrinth of complicated characters whose histories are larger than life. And yet, the whole time, there's an actual narrative which you can follow completely, which I just think is actually incredibly brilliant to be able to do, to both have this philosophical conversation in terms of how you set up a novel, and yet also have just the story run through it. But you each approach it in very different ways, and I wonder how, I'm going to ask the same question that he sort of asked of you, I also want to ask of you, which is, how does your own public relate to those novels that you put forward and to the characters?
Well, in the beginning I was very controversial in Turkey, and there were those old critics that I grew up with their essays and all those, guidances. They hated me because the language I used, it was, for them it was not very literary. But now everybody is writing that way. It was like 20 years ago. And what you described, of course you describe better than me. The writers cannot describe or summarize their own writings. And they ask me, the journalists, what are you writing about? I get very nervous because I don't know what to say. I say, I write about life. That's all. And all you're saying is about life. Sometimes we don't know where we are really. Our lives are, doesn't matter if we live in America or Istanbul, Turkey, or Paris or Brussels, that life is so complicated, and many times we feel we are so small, very small, and you think the whole space that the earth is a small planet and we are on it, and we don't know when we die, and we are all expecting to be happy. And this concept of happiness is actually 19th century invention. Before that, there were no expectation for happiness. When I discovered that, I was so happy. Really trying to survive then, no medicine and no birth control and water pollution, the water sanitation and all those things. People were dying. And suddenly that, technology and the antibiotics and all those things came, and we are alive, and then we survive. So what then? We want to be happy. What is happening? Buy more, and this makes us even unhappier. And that's why my books are like life, as I said. It's very complicated. We don't know if it's real or not. I mean, I can easily write this room in my novels that I can turn it as a dream, that maybe I'm dreaming now. And of course, writers, as one of my psychiatrist friends says, if we cure you, you can't write. So, the reality and fiction is always, there's a very thin line between, and maybe you shouldn't be get any cure. That's the only solution.
So I think we have time for maybe one last question, and then please.
You're both here participating in the Pen Festival. Maybe you also have some spare time. Are you gathering material, either about what you experience in the streets or participating in a festival, a literary festival? Are you writing? Are you inspired?
Well, actually, life is a laboratorium for a writer, I believe. And you don't have to be a writer if you're a good observant. You can use it anywhere. But last night I participated in an event called Safari, Reading Safari. So it was a wonderful thing. I've been in several literary colonies, art colonies, and different places, but it was very special. So we were invited, you were also somewhere, in a special building where artists are living.
West Bath.
Yes, West Bath, it's called. And it was very difficult for me to get there. 1.5 hours. Anyway, so we were sitting in a room, a real house, and young people were coming and going out, and we were reading and discussing with them. There was beautiful sunset behind the Hudson River, and there was a lovely cat that I miss my cat. It's been a week that I haven't. So I was thinking, this is not really real what we are doing. It's so, abstract that I am here from Istanbul. And my grandmother, if she was alive, she would think that, what the hell you're doing here? You don't have many kids, you don't have a husband, and you're in somewhere called America, sitting there and you're talking about your dreams. What is this? It's a generation. So it's like, as you're saying, the dreams and the realities just together, and things are changing so fast. And those young girls, for example, they came there and that's exchange students, and they were expecting to see maybe an American writer. Then there I was sitting there, and then a Turkish woman writer, and they all, you know, prejudices and all those things about the Turkish Ottoman history, Islam, and I was sitting there and talking to them about my travels. It was so absurd and abstract to them, but I was part of it. And it was like a game, but it was reality. So I think it would be a good story. I don't know.
Basically, my answer is the same, but I must tell I never had a hotel room with such a wonderful view. So most of the time, I just watched the view, and it's totally impossible to tell if it will become a novel someday. It's much too recent to know.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming today.